When I look at these two games and you think, okay, is this going to be like last year where the Aggies stumbled late? And, you also look, okay, are there teams that can exploit the Aggies' weaknesses? You think, okay, what Nevada and San Diego State did to the Aggies as far as being able to force a ton of fouls inside. Again, the Aggies committed 48 fouls in the last two games against the Aztecs and against the Wolfpack, and all these things. To me, I don't know if it's a matchup problem, because when I look at the whole body of evidence, Utah State held San Diego State to 62, 63 points in the first matchup. They held Nevada to 62 points in the first matchup. The Aggies scored almost the exact same number of points. I think, what was the score of the previous game between Utah State and San Diego State? It was 71-66.
71-66.
The Aggies scored 72 points. Like, it was something that Calhoun pointed out.
Offensively consistent.
Yeah, they haven't won a game against, Utah State was 3-1 against San Diego State in Coach Calhoun's tenure. And he said they haven't won a single game with their offense. It's been about defense every single time.
Yeah, against Nevada, the first meeting, the Aggies only gave up 62.
Yeah.
And last week, they gave up 80.
And so to me, this is about Utah State just being inconsistent and not playing to their potential. Because you could all say, well, what about when they give up 83 to Wyoming? Well, they held Wyoming to 62. They held Memphis to 75, pretty solid. They played well against Boise, who has size. Like, Utah State has played against teams that have size, that have length, that have talented and versatile bigs, and have won. Sometimes have won big. New Mexico, they got that Bullion kid, who's one of the best bigs in the country, or at least in the conference, if not one of the best, at least freshman bigs in the country. They held New Mexico to 66 in their own dang gym.
Right.
So to me, this isn't a Utah State has this fundamental flaw about them. This fundamental flaw in their bigs or their guards, because for every single game you want to point to and said the Aggies sucked in this game and therefore everything about, the wing defenders are terrible, the bigs are terrible, every game you want to point to, last two games included, especially last night, and you say, this is who they are. I can bring you 2 or 3 or 4 games in which every single weakness they displayed against San Diego State and Nevada and UNLV and Grand Canyon were not weaknesses. In fact, were strengths in a previous game.
They coached around it.
Yeah, the Aggies, well, not even coached around it. They just played better.
Yeah.
Like against San Diego State, what was the scheme in the first game against San Diego State that was so much better? Like, point to me the scheme. Like, is Carson Templin, can he just not handle San Diego State? That ain't it, because he had a fantastic game against them in the last time. He had 18 points, hit a couple of 3-pointers. Like, Utah State has a good example, and even a recent example, of playing well against teams that supposedly have these bigs that can just toss the Aggies around. So it is not this systemic problem with the roster or the coaching or the scheme. It is just the players and coaches being on the same page and executing the game plan when they're out there on the court. And we've talked about this a few times, how the numbers tend to show the Aggies just overperform and underperform in a lot of these games. Right now, they're underperforming. Do they fix these things? The sky seems to be falling now, but, I was throwing around the alarm bells when they lost to UNLV and Grand Canyon, making those comparisons to last year.
Yep. Then
they held 4 straight opponents to under 67 points. And then, after that, they went on an 8-game winning streak overall, including several blowout wins. That's what happened the last time they looked like they were falling to pieces. They turned it around. And they didn't need a break, some rest last time to do it. 3 days after losing to UNLV, they go on the road and they beat Colorado State after a rough first half. And then they just, continue from there, go on an 8-game win streak. Didn't get a bye. They just manned up and played better.
Right. Well, and they blitzed some of these teams. So they weren't stressed. It wasn't the stress on the body so much because they were just absolutely destroying these teams.
Yeah.
So it's not like they were eking out a bunch of wins. They were blowing teams out. So, the 2 losses in a row, do we raise alarm bells and do we freak out? No. There a level of concern? Sure, there should be. But Utah State is still in a good position. They're tied for first in the Mountain West. They have the best resume in the Mountain West. They have the best metrics in the Mountain West. They've still got 3 tough games ahead of them, but 2 of those 3 are at home in your great venue, which has proven difficult for opponents to find victories in.
Yeah.
So let's not freak out. Utah State has had some challenges against teams with these types of rosters, but they've also shown and proven that they can work through that and still beat these types of teams. It's not a total kryptonite that will bring them down every time they face it.
Yeah, so to me, when I look at these last 2 games, I don't see this extreme worry about scheme or personnel or capability with the Aggies. To me, it's about, is this going to become a trend? Because if it becomes a trend, then the Aggies might find themselves going 1-2 over these last 3 games. If they are able to just, reverse some of these trends again, because they're not going to change the scheme. You can't really change anything about that. You can't change who's on the team. It's just going to be about playing better, playing like you did against San Diego State in the first game, playing like you did against Boise State or against Memphis or against New Mexico.
Yeah, playing with purpose.
Yeah, play like
be
that
intentional,
team.
Be aggressive.
Yeah, against teams that have bigger size and in some cases better athletes. Utah State went out there and just, opened up a can of whoopee on an opponent. They've gone out and done that. They could have done that to Nevada or San Diego State. And, not to say they would have blown out those teams in their venue, but heck, they blew out New Mexico in the pit. So, anything's possible. The Aggies just didn't play to their peak. San Diego State, that was the worst version of the Aggies we've seen. And Nevada, that was a mediocre version of the Aggies, and they still dang near won. So if we see a better version of the Aggies, they can go 3-0. The sky's not falling until it actually collapses.
They're absolutely capable of winning all 3 of these games and playing well through the conference tournament. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that really ends up being my takeaway. We can talk all day about all the terrible things that went into losing to San Diego State by 17 points. And the concern is justifiable for losing 2 straight games. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and assign losses to the Aggies in the next 3 games. Because, again,
this is a good team
and
coached by good coaches.